Kia ora koutou, welcome. My name is Marcin Betkier. I'm a lecturer at the Law Faculty, which is on the opposite side of the Bunny Street. And my main area of interest is IT and law, so everything which intersects, is on the intersection of law and technology. And I would like to say a couple of words about the Christchurch call and its possible extensions or alternatives. So I will follow up the Peter's thought about what we can actually do and what we can do more or do better. I believe that the Christchurch call is a good initiative. It's actually really commendable that someone wants to actually do something good and took up the moment to change at least a small aspect of social media for better. So I'm not going to overly criticize Christchurch call. In particular, I'm not going to get into the provisions and ask how much meaningful they are. They're voluntary by their nature, and they have to remain on the level of some vagueness. Unfortunately, what I would like to do actually is to draw a slightly broader picture of what we can do to regulate social media, and that depends. Of what we actually want to do, to address, how deep we want to go with that. Whether we want to eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online, like that was the goal of the Christchurch call, or we want to make online social media a safer place for us, or we actually want to tackle the main issue there, so the lack of accountability and enormous power of platforms and the fact that they actually start to, or they already started to act to the detriment of their users and societies as a whole. So, and I will go through those steps in my presentation, or to those goals, to highlight what and how those things can be achieved. So, the first thing is, can we really eliminate terrorist and violent extremist content online? And the frank answer is no. Without regulation, we can only play a whack-a-mole with both platforms and the users. And the whack-a-mole with users was played after the Christchurch event, when they were changing the video and reposting, republishing it. I think that was 800 different versions of those video posted, and the platforms were taking them down. So the game was about to cheat the upload filters. And the whack-a-mole with platforms is actually what Peter has started or he said actually, that their incentive is to, they have a conflict of interest. Earning money on clicking on viral content is their incentive. And the second thing is that we don't really have a full statistics of what happened. How many of those videos were seen, by whom, and when exactly it was taken out of the website. We just don't have data, we don't have means for regulating those platforms because they don't want general public or governments to have those means. So, and even if we were successful with making them accountable, we really cannot play the same game with all smaller websites around the globe, with 8chan, 4chans, and so on. So it's a losing game, in a way. What we can do what Spark did to block domain name or IP addresses of websites that are delivering that content, but it's somewhat similar to what we actually do with child pornography under the auspices of Department of Internal Affairs. But this is broad brush, so we are blocking the whole website with all the content inside, whether it's legitimate or illegitimate, or I'm not sure that we do really want private companies to have a free hand in blocking the information sources. You have a citation, quotation from the CEO of Cloudflare, who just blocked the 4chan or 8chan, I don't remember, or any other Nazi site, related site, and he just said straightforwardly that I just woke up this morning in a bad mood and decided to kick them out of the internet. So the question is, are really terms and conditions of online contracts the best place to regulate freedom of expression? And do we want those people to actually regulate the freedom of expression? And I would like to say that probably not. This is just too much. So if the privatization of law enforcement is not the way forward, so let's check what we can do with the regulation. And this is the example of the German Netzwerkdurchsetzungsgesetz, which is their approach to actually only enforce already existing mainly criminal law provisions which forbid some content. The act itself, it was heavily controversial, criticized by many also international bodies like European Commission. It only provides users with mechanisms to submit complaints to the biggest online service platform and make sure that they are taking that things down in a specific time frame. And of course the sanction, failure to comply, and fine up to 50 million euros. And obligation to be transparent, report every 6 months, and thanks to that obligation on transparency, we have those data to compare from the last full half year. And we can see the numbers there. And first thing is why Facebook is so low in numbers. This is because the possibility for Google or Twitter to complain for the user was easily accessible. It was the drop, for example, for Twitter, it was drop down menu from the tweet itself. So it was easy to complain. Facebook used so-called dark patterns. So they actually made the form hard to find and made the customer to click a couple of times to get to make a complaint, which ended up with some 500 times less or more complaints from the user. But we see if there is a way, there is a tool, many people just complain about that, and it seems to be working. Let's take a look what actually was removed from Google Transparency Report. Sorry about the small font there. This is the comparison what was actually removed because of the breach of the Google's, they are called community guidelines, so there are global community guidelines, and what was removed because of that particular local German law. So the local German law is responsible for roughly 20% of removals. It was responsible in that time, and it was mainly in the area of hate speech or political extremism, terrorist or unconstitutional content, and defamation or insults. And to be honest, I don't know what to think about it. Because on the one hand, it could mean that these 1,200 or 1,300 complaints were detected thanks to the new law, which is good. But on the other hand, I was thinking, well, maybe service providers just prefer to be on the safe side and to take down things which they maybe not really breaching, but they don't want to pay 50 million. It's just safer for them to take stuff down. Maybe yes, maybe no. What are the effects of that regulation? They're a bit unclear. All the controversies around that are still there. People are discussing that. What it probably achieves, it pushes extreme or illegal content further away from the view of people, and it's not a little, it's a lot, I think. But based on this data, it's hard to assess what's the effectiveness, what's the level of over-reporting, or what's the chilling effect, or actually what to do more, how to improve it. There are some ideas how to improve it. For common database of deleted content to know what was there, or publishing complaints about deletions, or finding some state authority, independent bodies to which people can appeal to. So those are the ideas about regulation of the content, in fact. This is where Germany is right now with their law. But there's a deeper problem to that. And deeper problem is actually that there is too much power on the side of online service providers, and that they actually are free completely from or independent from the scrutiny of states and act independent from their customers. There is a debate to what extent social media with their echo chambers and filter bubbles really cause polarization, radicalization, and fuel terrorism. There are prominent academics who say that it's obvious that it just happens. Yeah? And people like Cass Sunstein, for example, with his newest book, claims exactly that. But I saw also the research showing that it's not so meaningful. So that's debatable. I won't go to I'm not ready to claim that social media fuel terrorism by the very nature of their operation. What I can claim, surely, that they are out of control of their customers and states. And there is imbalance of power arising from the architectural, the owner, because they're owners of the architecture where everything happens. And we don't know what happens there. Yeah? And the market model in which customers, individuals, are not really customers, because the money comes from the business side of the market, which incentivizes the platforms to gather as much or as many data as possible, because the better profiles of the individuals they will have, the more money they will receive from the business side. And it's not actually about attention. It's not actually about influencing or shaping consumer behavior. It's shaping our behavior. It's shaping our behavior as constituents, as public servants, as individuals. It directly affects autonomy of people. And that's the problem. And to be honest, we don't know where we are on the spectrum between complete lack of transparency and maybe it's still okay, everything is fine, or on the mass scale deception or manipulation, which was alleged, supposedly happened with Cambridge Analytica. We don't know where we are there. We know that the tools are in place, the mechanisms are in place, and the business model which is there is operating in a way, is actually fueling, is the influencing individuals, shaping their behavior, changing their behavior, is in the core of the business model. It's not some peripherally, it's not the outcome, it's the very element of actually how it works. It has to work like this. So we have to change it somehow. How to change it somehow? How to change it? It's actually a picture from my book, which, well, hopefully it will be published this month, because there is some holiday delay in Europe. I propose to change or shape, to make a structural change in the business model. I propose to introduce the third parties acting for individual, to put them back in control of their data. It actually doesn't change a lot in the service providers' business models, I mean their use of data and so on. What it changes is that there will be some third party which acts for the individual, not for the service provider, doesn't benefit from data, but is able to provide the user with tools to manage data, all the privacy settings in those silos of the service providers. So the idea is, because we don't have the leverage because of money, we cannot vote with our feet because it's free. Everything is free. We pay them with data, but we don't know how much we pay them, and we don't know we cannot stop paying and go to other place. But we could have this leverage of actually changing our privacy settings, taking back data, or changing the settings, or making them to not use those data if we don't want what they are doing with those data. So that's the more or less of idea of which is presented fully in the book. It's a longer piece. What it requires? It requires not just, as it's seen on this picture, not just the legal regulation. It requires those interfaces, those technical tools, those economic tools which will shape the new, slightly changed business models, and therefore incentives of the service providers like Facebook, like Google, and so on. So this is some idea of actually what we can do to move forward, to do more than that, which could make those service providers more accountable to the people. So to sum up, because it's the high time to do this. So Christchurch code is good. Regulation is significantly better than that. And there are some options which are unexplored, even in the more advanced regulation, which is right now in Germany. But actually, what we should aim for are structural changes to the business model, and this is the best. I'm not claiming that my idea is the best in the world, but this is some thinking actually towards the structural changes in the business model, because this is what we need to do in a longer time. thank you very much for your appearance, patience, and we will gladly take all your questions.